percent. Percent means parts out of 100. For example, 78% means 78 parts out of 100. We could write it as a fraction, 78 parts out of 100 total. And then of course you could reduce, but this shows 78%. Also, if you think of money, a dollar has 100 pennies. So 78 out of 100 pennies would be 78 cents or 0.78. So those are some forms of the percent. In this section, we're going to convert from percent to decimal and a fraction, and then also back to percent. When you do calculations, you have to work without the percent symbol to do the math. There are a few percents that you should memorize because they'll help you know if your answers are reasonable. One of those is 100%. 100% is equal to 1. And if you remember, we're always allowed to multiply by 1. That's our multiplicative identity. And so because 100% equals 1, we can get anything into percent by multiplying by 100%. And that's allowed because it's equal to 1. Some others that you should know, 50% is equal to a half. This is 50 parts out of 100 reduces to a half. If you have lots of memory space, I would say go for the other two in between. So 75% of something will be 75 parts out of 100 or 3/4. And 25% of something will be 25 parts out of 100 or 1/4. So if you try to memorize those four, that will help you know if answers are reasonable. Our first conversion that we'll look at is to change from a percent to a fraction. We will just use the definition. Percent means parts of 100, and then reduce. So for our first example, we're going to convert 34% to a fraction. So we're going to a fraction, we'll use the definition. So 34% means 34 parts out of 100, and then we'll just need to reduce. So these are both even. They end in an even digit, so we can divide by 2. So we'll divide each by 2. 2 into 100 will go 50. And 2 into 34 will go 17 times. Next, we will change from a percent to a decimal. You drop the percent and move the decimal 2 places to the left. For our next example, we will convert 34% to a decimal. So we're going to drop our percent symbol. Let me write up bigger. That's what we have. So we'll drop the percent symbol off and move the decimal 2 places to the left. If you don't see the decimal, remember it's at the end. So we will have 0.34. A common one that you might have to do, especially if you live in Indian River County, is to convert 7% to a decimal. This is a sales tax. So if we're going to convert 7% to a decimal, so this is what we have, 7%. And we're going to drop the percent, and the decimal has to go 2 places to the left. Right now it's at the end. So 1, 2. So we're going to have to add a 0 to get it over enough spaces. So 0.07 or 7 cents on a dollar. Our next conversion is to change from a decimal to a percent. Anytime we're going to a percent, we can multiply by 100%, whether it is a decimal or a fraction. So for our next example, we'll convert 0.032 to a percent. So this is what we have. We want to go to percent, so we multiply by 100%. If you remember your shortcuts of multiplying by a power of 10 It just moves the decimal to the right as many places as you have zeros in your power of 10. So we have 2 zeros in 100. It's going to move the decimal 2 places to the right. So we're going to have 3.2, and then you will have the percent symbol. So anytime you're going to change a decimal to a percent, it's just going to move the decimal 2 places to the right for those 2 zeros in 100%. For our next example, we will convert 2.5 to a percent. So we have a decimal going to a percent. It will move 2 places to the right for those 2 zeros in 100. So we're really multiplying by 100%. Our 2 zeros moves our decimal 2 places to the right. We have to add that 0 so we can get 2 places, and then we add our percent symbol. It is okay to have a percent larger than 100%. Remember, 1 equals 100%, and we have 2.5. So it is reasonable for it to be more than 100%. Our last conversion will be to change from a fraction to a percent. So we will multiply by 100%. Anytime you're going to a percent, you can multiply by 100%. So we're going to convert 2/5 to a percent. So we'll write down what we have. We have 2/5, and we're going to multiply by 100% to get percent. We'll make it look like a fraction. So we'll put it over 1. Remember, when you multiply fractions, you can simplify on the diagonal. So we could divide out the 5. 5 into 5 once, and 5 into 100 will go 20. And then we will multiply across. So we'll go across the numerators. 2 times 20 is 40. Also, you have your percent symbol. Denominators, 1 times 1 is 1, so you still have 1. So 40%. There is an alternate method of changing a fraction to percent, and this is especially nice if you have a calculator. You can first convert the fraction to a decimal. On a calculator, you would just punch it in top to bottom. So you would do 2 divided by 5, and it would give you 0.4, and then you would just move your decimal 2 places to the right. Since we don't have a calculator, we can do it by hand. So we would change 2/5 to a decimal. So this is a middle step that it doesn't mention. So first of all, if we change 2/5 to a decimal, we have to divide. Remember, long division, denominator into the numerator. 5 won't go into 2, so we'll put our decimal, take it straight up, and then add zeros. So we'll add a 0. Now we can do 5 into 20. We'll go 4 times. 4 5s are 20. Now, this did not get you into percent. It just changed you to a decimal. But to go from a decimal to a percent, you'll just move the decimal 2 places to the right and add your percent symbol. So once you have calculators, this would be the technique that you use to get a fraction over to percent, just because it is so fast to get the fraction into a decimal. Solving percent problems. We're going to look at solving percent problems as equations. They can also be solved with ratios, but we're going to concentrate on using equations. The formula P times B equals A can be used to solve the percent problems as equations. You will be given 2 of the variables and will solve for the third. P stands for percent. You will recognize it with the percent symbol or the word. Convert the percentage to decimal form before substituting into the formula. Remember, you can't calculate with that percent symbol on there. And to change it over to a decimal, drop the percent and move the decimal 2 places to the left. B is the base. It is what you are taking the percent of. It almost always follows the word of. If you have a word problem instead of a direct translation, you can think of the base as the whole thing. A is the amount. To locate it in your problem, it is usually isolated by the word is. If you have a word problem instead of a direct translation, you can think of the amount as the part or selected piece. In our translation, is means equals, so it gives your equals symbol. Of means times. So now we'll solve some problems. Our formula is P times B equals A. We will remember some of our percents. 100% equals 1, 75% equals 3/4, 50% equals a half, and 25% equals 1/4. This will help us to know if our answers are reasonable. So for our first example, what is 7% of 45? So we're going to find a percent of something. I would write my formula, P times B equals A, and then I would look for the pieces. Right. First, let's find the percent. So it's going to be 7%. It has the percent symbol. This is our P. Remember, we have to switch it to decimal form to plug it in. So we're going to drop the percent and go 2 places to the left. So our P is going to be 0.07. Next, we look for our B. You go back to the percent and keep reading. 7% of, whatever you take the percent of should be the base. So the 45 is our base. And that only leaves one piece, which is going to be our A. The A can be at the beginning or the end. It's not going to be in the middle. So find your equals. Let's just check that we're correct here. And there's only one thing on that side. Remember, the A is isolated. And so the what is our A. That's going to be our unknown. And then we'll just do the math on the other side. So this is a multiplication problem. 45 times 0.07 and then remember you have to place your decimal. If 2 digits after the decimal, that's what we will need in the answer. So 3.15 equals our A. Let's see if this is reasonable. So 7%. 7% is just a little bit. It's not even up to a quarter. A quarter would be 25%. So just a little bit of 45. 3.15, yes, that's just a little bit of 45. If we had made a decimal error, say we put it after the 1, 31.5. If we look at the percent of that out of 45, well, that's way too big. That's more than half. So it would definitely help us catch a decimal error just remembering these percents. Let's look at our next example. The number 40 is 80% of what number? So first I would write my formula, P times B equals A, and then look for your pieces. So let's look for the percent. Easy to find. It has the percent symbol. So that's our P. Continuing reading after the percent to find your base. So it says 80% of what number? This time our base is the piece we don't know. So we don't know that. And our A is the only one left. It's going to be at the beginning. Here's the is. The 40 is going to be the A. So our percent, 80%, remember to switch it to a decimal. Drop the percent, go 2 places to the left. So 0.80 or 0.8 times our base. Our base we did not know, so we'll keep a variable. Our A is 40. And now we just solve with our equation solving skills. So we want to isolate the B. We will divide on both sides by 0.8. This will give us just B on the left. On the right-hand side, we're going to divide that out. If you're allowed to use a calculator, this will be easy. Just remember, punch it in top to bottom, 40 divided by 0.8. But you also need to know how to do it by hand. So 0.8 into 40
You have to get the decimal out of the divisor and move the same amount of spaces underneath in your dividend. Then take the decimal straight up. So 8 divided into 40 will go 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. Subtract, bring down. 8 into 0 won't go. We have to go all the way up to our decimal. So our B is 50. Let's see if that's a reasonable answer. So 80% of 50. 80% is a lot. It's more than half. So more than half of 50 is 40. Yes, this is a reasonable answer. If we made a decimal error, say we didn't carry it over, we took it straight up and just had 5, 80% of 5 is 40, we would catch that kind of error. For our next example, what percent of 74 is 11.1? So we'll write our formula, P times B equals A, and then we'll find our pieces. So first we'll look for the percent. This time that's going to be our unknown. What percent? Keep reading. Right after the percent should be your base. What percent of 74 is going to be your base? Here's your is, and the A this time is on the end of the problem. Remember, it can be at the beginning or the end. So we'll plug in. So percent we don't know. Keep a P. The base is 74. Keep your equals. And the amount, or the A, is 11.1. Now you're set up to solve. You're going to isolate the P. So you have to divide on both sides by 74. Now, anytime you solve for P, it takes one more step than the other kind. Remember, when we plug into P, we have to put it in as a decimal. That's the kind of answer you're getting out. You are not getting the percent symbol. So we have to convert this back to a percent symbol. If you have a calculator, a fast way is punch it in top to bottom and get your decimal, and then you will move it 2 places to the right to get percent. A calculator would give us 0.15 for this, and we would move the decimal 2 places to the right and add the percent symbol. Let's do it real quick by hand. If you're just changing it to a decimal first, 74 into 11.1. No decimal and divisor, your decimal goes straight up. 74 into 111 will go one time, multiply back, subtract, add a 0 and bring down, and this will go 5 times. So it gives the 0.15. You still have to change it to percent. So move your decimal 2 places to the right and add your percent symbol. Let's see if this is a reasonable answer. So 15%, so not even a fourth, 15% of 74 is 11.1. That's reasonable. Let's look at one more example. It says Jan got 17 questions right on a test that had 20 questions. What percentage did she get correct? So this one is not a direct translation. Remember at the beginning that I said you can think of the base as the whole thing and the amount as the part. So we can still work with our formula. So we'll write our formula. P times B equals A. And we're going to look for our percent because it says what percentage. So that's our P. So we need to figure out which one is our B and which one is our A. The B is the whole thing. It's what you're taking the percent of. So the 20 is going to be our B, and the 17 that she got right is our selected piece. That is going to be the A. And then we'll fill in and use the same problem. So the P we don't know. Our base or our total is 20 questions. The amount she got correct is 17. And now we're ready to solve. So we want to isolate our P, divide by 20. And again, we're doing a problem where we're solving for percent. So we have to switch back to the percent symbol. So 17 divided by 20, if you have a calculator, punch it top to bottom, will give you 0.85. And then remember to take your decimal over 2 places to the right and add your percent symbol. So 85%. If you're doing it by hand, 20 into 17 won't go. Put your decimal, take it straight up, and you can add zeros. So that will go 8 times. 8 20s are 160. Subtract, bring down, add a 0, and there's your 5. You would still need to go to percent. So our percent is 85%. Let's see if this is reasonable. So 85%, so more than 3/4. She had correct. Yes, 17 is more than 3/4 of 20. So very good. So P equals 85%. So what if we ask, what percent did she get wrong? What could you do without going through this whole procedure? What percent of questions did she miss? So because there's 100% altogether, if you just took 100% and subtracted the 85, you would get the part that she missed. So she missed 15%.
Percent increase and percent decrease problems. The standard formula for percent increase is the original plus the increase is equal to the final. And for the increase, it's a percentage times the original. Remember, for percent, to do this calculation, you have to change the percent over to a decimal. Percent increase problems are sometimes called markup or profit problems. These can be problems where a business buys an item, they're going to add on some profit and sell it to the customer. Percent decrease problem, standard formula, original minus the decrease equals the final. The decrease is a calculation, percent times the original. And the percentage, again, we will have to plug in as a decimal. These are discount problems, so something's on sale. That's one type. There could be other decrease problems. I usually just go with one formula and then remember to add if it's increase, subtract if it's decrease. Let's look at an example. A store sells its merchandise for cost plus 15%. What is the selling price of a portable CD player that costs the store $19.50? So the store sells its merchandise for cost plus 15%. So is this going to be an increase or a decrease problem? It will be an increase problem because they have a cost, that's their original, and they're going to add an increase or a profit on there. So for our formula, we will use addition. The original plus the increase will equal the final. So let's plug in what we know. Originally, it cost the store $19.50. So we'll plug that in. For the increase, we don't know the dollar amount, but it's 15% of $19.50. So that is a multiplication. Change your percent to a decimal. So drop the percent and go 2 places to the left. So 0.15 for 15% of the original $19.50 will equal the final. All right, so we're going to find the final. This is a good place to see why you do order of operations. You have to figure out the increase before you can add them together, or multiplication goes before addition. So we'll do our multiplication. You can use your calculator here, or you can do it by hand. 0.15 times 1950. I'll do it by hand, so you will know how to do it. So 1950 times 0.15
multiplying everything by 5. And then times 1, and I will go in one place. And now we have to count in 4 decimal places total. 1, 2, 3, 4. And since this is a profit problem, we'll go ahead and round up. So $2.92 cents, and then a 5 will round it on up to a whole cent. So we're going to add on $2.93 for profit. Add that to $19.50, and that will give our final. To add decimals, remember you write them vertically, lining up the decimal. Decimal goes straight down. So $22.43 equals the selling price or the final price. Let's look at a next example. Macy's is having a 40% off sale. A dress that Mrs. H likes originally cost $65. If she buys it on sale, how much will it cost? Then we have another part to this question. How much will it cost including 7% sales tax? So we'll leave the second part and concentrate on the first part. So it is something that's going to be on sale. Is that going to be an increase or a decrease? That will be a decrease. So we're going to use our formula with the subtraction. So for our original, the original cost was $65. We're going to subtract for the decrease or discount 40% off. So we have to change it to a decimal, drop your percent, and go 2 places to the left. So 0.40 or 0.4 times the original, so times 65 will equal the final. So again, we have to follow order of operations. We will do our multiplication before we subtract. So we're going to do 65 times 0.4. And our decimal needs to go in one place. So it's discounted $26. We'll subtract that from the original. Will give us the final. So 65 minus 26 gives us $39 for the final. All right. Part 2 of the question is how much will it cost including sales tax? So we're going to have to add this on. The sales tax is based on that final price. So we want what is 7% of 39. So that will be a multiplication. So we can do it on the side. 39 times 0.07. Remember, switch it to a decimal. And in 2 places, so 2.73, and we're going to add that to the 39. So I'm just going to work right here. Remember, we would line up the decimal, so the decimal in the 39 is at the end. So $41.73 equals the final. We have one more example. This one is actually the most difficult kind. The problem says find last year's salary if after a 4% pay raise, this year's salary is $33,800. So we are getting a raise. This would be an increase problem, so we want the formula with addition. So this time, the part that we don't know is the original. The original would be last year's salary. We're getting an increase, a raise, and we know the final, which would be this year's salary. So we could put that one in, the $33,800. And we know the percent raise, but we don't know the entire increase because the percent is based on the original, so we have to do a calculation there. In algebra, when you don't know something, that's what we use a variable for our unknown. So we're going to call our original x. We don't know this, and then we're going to add on our increase, which is 4% times x. So 4% will be 0.04 times x. Now we have a regular linear equation. We would combine our like terms on the left-hand side. Remember, the coefficient of x is 1 if you don't see a number. So we have 1 plus 0.04, which will give us 1.04. 1.04 times x equals 33,800. And then you will just solve by dividing out your coefficient. So now we're going to divide on both sides by 1.04. That will solve for x. Remember, if you're punching this in your calculator, to go top to bottom. 33,800 divided by 1.04. If you have to do it by hand, it will be a long division. So 1.04 into 33,800. Remember to take your decimal out of the divisor, so 2 places over. You'll have to do the same underneath. So we're going to divide by 104. So we're going into 338. We'll go 3 times, multiply back, subtract, and bring down. And 104 into 260 will go 2 times. And subtract, bring down, and 104 into 520 will go 5. This one's going to go even. I'm going to run out of space here. But since it went even, these other zeros are just going to go 0. So I'm going to be able to get all the way to the end. And then you would have 0 again. So this will be 32,500. Now, let's see if this is a reasonable answer. So if this was last year's salary, and they have a 4% raise, so a little bit of a raise, and then this year's salary is 33,800. So yes, that's a reasonable answer.